I know some of you don't want to hear positive things about Zenless Zero. You want me to get on cam and start trashing the game for whatever reason. You don't like the combat, you don't like the TV system, you don't like the character models, you don't like the world. There are any number of reasons why people dislike this game right now. They are all entirely warranted. I'm not here to convince you that the game is good. I'm not here to convince you that the game is bad. I'm here to discuss my experience over the course of the last several days. I've been streaming it every single day for several hours each day and playing off stream. I played the game for almost 20 hours total. I've engaged in a significant portion of what, at the very least, the first 20 hours of the game has to offer and provides us as players. And while ultimately this is not going to be the final official review from me, as I do plan on finishing the game before I give my full entire impressions on it, as I do believe that it would be a little bit disingenuous of me to just sit here and trash the game after only having played it for an hour or a couple of hours. I do want to go over the things that I did enjoy about the game and the things I didn't enjoy about the game. Now, I know you're looking at the title and you're thinking to yourself, Stix, the game exceeded your expectations, really? Yeah, I want to address that first. Zenless Zone Zero 100% exceeded my expectations. The reason it exceeded my expectations isn't probably what you're thinking. The reason it exceeded my expectations is because I had my expectations set incredibly low. I looked at the reception of the game, I looked at the style of the game, I looked at the viewership for the game, the overall hype for the game. There were no signals that this was going to be a big or well-received game, that this was going to be a popular game, but that this was even really going to be a fun game that appealed to me personally. But after having played quite an egregious amount of the game over the last few days, I can say that the low expectations that I had were significantly met and overcome. The tutorial was horrible. I understand that the tutorial is irritating, it is drawn out, and the tutorial alone forced a significant number of players to quit. It feels almost like they're holding your hand for hours and you're unable to do anything at all. You can't really engage in combat. I think you do like a couple minutes combat in the first several hours of the game. It's just talking, navigating the TV system, walking around, more talking. It is obnoxious and it is bad. But so was Wuthering Waves' intro. I think the beginning of both games has been handled very poorly. I think both games are fairly boring to play initially, but as a lot of people realize, the more you played Wuthering Waves, the better the game got. 1.0 of Genshin was also very boring in the beginning. A lot of people, for whatever reason, seem to forget that Genshin had a very boring start. They have nostalgia goggles on that prevents them from remembering this. With this in mind, as I continued to play through the game, as I made progress through Zenless, I found the game continued to get better. Yes, I will immediately point out, there is still a significant focus on the TVs. After over 20 hours of playing, the game consists of this. You talk to the NPCs, you then move around the town for a minute, you then talk to the NPCs, you then move around the town for a minute, you talk to the NPCs. After numerous cutscenes, you run to your computer. You do the little TV thing. You do 2, 3, 4 battles. These battles last 30 seconds, a minute and a half. They consist of you holding your left mouse button because you don't really need to do any more than that, honestly. After 20 odd hours of playing the game, I haven't really required anything more than that. Now, I know there is more complexity to the game. I do. Mechanically, the game's combat is much deeper than that, much deeper than what is shown on the surface. This is something that I still haven't even really experienced. There are plenty of people on YouTube that will go over the intricacies of the combat. I'm a casual, so I'm probably never really going to get that too deeply into it myself. But on the surface, and this is what the vast majority of us will see, the combat feels very basic. It feels very slow, and it feels very boring. It forces you to use, for whatever reason, that swap mechanic, which essentially, and this is a common complaint that people have had, and I also have, forcing you to play as the characters you do not want to play as. Like, I got the Neko girl, Nekomata. I wanted to play as her, but I'm repeatedly forced to swap to the other two characters I have to make use of that swap mechanic. As an additive to this, the combat itself doesn't even really require the swapping. Why? Because the basic enemies just stand around. The bosses just stand around. Like, training dummies. They don't really even attack you. There are no real challenging mechanics present that require you to really actively pay attention to what's going on, at least from what I have played. This entire thing is based solely off of what I've played and may change at hour 30, hour 40, hour 50. Before I discuss Zenless in any more detail, I want to take a moment to thank my incredible patrons and YouTube channel members for allowing me to continue to do dedicated videos like this every single day. You guys are phenomenal. I cannot thank you all enough for the support. The enemies literally stand there for 5-10 seconds. They don't even attack you. And you're just mashing your left mouse button, slowly waiting for them to die because their HP pools are bloated to stretch out the duration of the encounter. The story is admittedly a little bit weak. It's light. It's not really too deep, and it seems really grounded, whereas other games have you, I don't know, traveling the galaxy, trying to save worlds, or trying to slay gods, or attempting to survive an apocalypse where most of humanity has been wiped out. Yeah, that is not Zenless, and a lot of people, unfortunately, are realizing that the story is probably too light for them, and they just don't really feel involved necessarily. That's also an issue that people are having with the new Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail expansion. After having played Shadowbringers and Endwalker, having them be so dark and thrilling and complicated. Add on to this that the story is a major focus of the game. It essentially limits how much you're actually capable of playing. The game is comprised of 10% actual combat, 30% the TV system, 20% walking around, and 50% story. I think that equates to 100% or 110. I don't remember the exact breakdown that I just did, but the story, the cutscenes and everything essentially amount to half of the entire game. So if you don't enjoy the story, like a lot of people don't, a lot of people are skipping the story, then the game is going to suck for you. Half the story is unvoiced, which is a little bit jarring. It detracted from my enjoyment anyway, because I don't know, I didn't really feel that enthralled by it. There'd be parts where the characters would be voiced, and then you'd kind of just move to a normal cutscene that had no voice acting, and the voice acting is really good, so it's kind of sad to see that, unlike in Genshin and Wuwa and Honkai, where the characters and the story and everything is all pretty much voice acted, I don't know, it was this weird disconnect for me where it wasn't, and I really like it. I like well voice acted games. Animations, however, oh my god, they are insane. They are incredibly expressive, although the character models are also a little bit bland, I think, and there are way too many child characters in game. I stressed this repeatedly on stream, and I'm gonna point it out here again. I think both Zenless Zone Zero and Wuthering Waves are setting a new standard, a quality standard for gacha games, where characters are showing more expression than at any point in the past. The cutscenes that we're seeing animated, the movements from the characters make games like Genshin, Punishing Gray Raven, any game that utilizes, even MMOs, that uses these stationary, sedentary models seem dated, look dated, feel dated. They add so much depth in terms of character to the story. When you see them moving, when you see them acting, it is an entire experience in and of itself. The world is not open, which means that there is a very finite amount of space, and you're going to pretty much see the same areas repeatedly over the course of the game. I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people have been hating on the game because it's not open world and you can't explore, and it's very limiting in terms of gameplay, and yeah, this game does not require you to actively explore. There are no chests, there are no, you know, the little sealy things, there are no puzzles to solve in the world, there aren't cool, new, interesting things to seek out and find. But you know what? If you want an open world game, you have two great choices right now, Wuwa and Genshin. Go play one of them, because that is not the kind of game that this is. Honestly, if you want a fast action open world anime RPG, a gacha that utilizes those specifics, go play Wuwa. If you want the same thing but with a slower but more diversified style of combat, which is what Genshin typically has with its elemental reaction system, go play Genshin, especially if Wuthering Waves isn't your style. You have games that literally cater to that very specific demographic of player, just like this is going to cater to a very specific demographic of player. That is not what this game is. People should not go into this game expecting something else, yet they still are, and they're disliking the game because it's not the kind of game that they thought it was going to be. But then again, like, we have that game already. We have multiple of that game already. Wuwa, Genshin, and even Tower of Fantasy. This game is instanced, story-driven, and love it or hate it, forces you into the TV system, which I am honestly not that bothered by. I actually don't mind the TV system at all. I feel like it's kind of relaxing. You only spend probably a couple minutes total in there. You spend about as much time in the TV system on average as you spend in combat. So you get like 2 minutes combat, you get 2 minutes in the TV system, 30 minutes of cutscenes, 5 minutes of running around, then back into the TV system for another 2 minutes, back into another 2 minutes of fighting, back into another 30 minutes of cutscenes. That is essentially Zenless Zone Zero over the course of the first 20-something hours. Is it bad? No, not at all. It has incredible character models. The characters are incredibly expressive. The world is beautiful. The voice acting is fantastic. The action combat is a lot of fun. But at the same time, you're forced into the TV system, which can get very boring very quickly. There's nothing to explore. No cool, unique things to find. The story is kind of bland and somewhat boring, makes you want to skip it. The characters are also a little bit bland, and there is a major focus on lollies, which I don't like. I like my big bodacious women. The game is very easy. There is a difficulty option, but even with that toggled on, the game is still incredibly easy. There is a very limited amount of actual stuff to do in-game. And did I mention the UI? Oh my god, traversing the UI is a nightmare. I feel like the UI is so unintuitive and irritating to actually navigate and utilize. Otherwise, this is a very fun game. At the end of the day, this is a fun game. Is it a great game? No. Is it a bad game? No. Although admittedly that is not an objective point, that is a subjective opinion of mine. I don't think it's incredible. I don't think it's horrible. I think this is a pretty good game. This is a game that you play on the side. This is not a game that you main as your main game. Well, it's not a game that I would main as my main game. It's definitely a game that I would play on the side, and I'm going to keep playing until I finish it. I don't know if I'll keep playing after that. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see if it improves or gets worse. If the focus on the TVs is improved or gets worse. The difficulty gets, well, more difficult, or it remains as easy as it currently is. Either way, those are my day 3, day 4 opinions of the game after 20-something hours. I'm having fun. I know that's gonna upset some people because the last video I did on Zenless where I mentioned we got 10 free polls and that was a great reward for players was very poorly received. There were lots of people hating on the game, claiming Honkai Impact is better, Wuthering Waves is better, Genshin Impact is better. So with a video that talks positively about various aspects of it, like this video does, I'm bound to get hate and there's nothing I can do about it. But you know what? That's fine. We all have different opinions. We're all welcome to have different opinions, like and dislike different games. Now, if Zenless Zone Zero is not a game you're at all interested in, absolutely no problem. I got you covered. 2 different videos on screen right now that might be more up your alley.